Welcome to War Bias, where we delve into the most pivotal conflicts in history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today, we're going to explore one of the most significant battles of the 19th century, a clash that would change the face of European politics and warfare, the Battle of Sadowa. This epic confrontation took place on July 3, 1866, in what is now the Czech Republic, and it's a story of strategic genius, tactical innovation, and the human cost of war. The German Confederation, a loose association of states, was dominated by two major powers, Austria and Prussia. For years, these two giants had been vying for control, their tensions simmering just below the surface like a pot about to boil over. The spark that would ignite this powder keg was the disputed territory of Schleswig-Holstein, a region in northern Germany that both Austria and Prussia claimed as their own. Imagine the scene, the rolling hills and verdant forests of Bohemia, where the armies of Austria and Prussia were about to clash in a struggle that would determine the fate of Europe. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the scent of gunpowder and sweat. The soldiers on both sides knew that this battle would be a turning point in history, one that would reshape the map of Europe and redefine the balance of power. In 1866, the situation came to a head when Prussia, under the leadership of the brilliant and ambitious Otto von Bismarck, began to make aggressive moves against Austria. Bismarck, a master strategist with a mind like a chess player, had been secretly building alliances with other German states, creating a powerful coalition that would soon challenge Austrian dominance. He was a man who understood the importance of timing and momentum, always looking for ways to gain an advantage over his opponents. Meanwhile, the Austrian Empire, led by Emperor Franz Joseph, was struggling to maintain its grip on power, facing internal unrest and external threats from Italy and Hungary. The Austrians were like a once mighty giant, now stumbling under the weight of their own bureaucracy and outdated traditions. They were hampered by a lack of strategic vision, unable to adapt to the changing circumstances of the war. As tensions escalated, both sides began to mobilize their armies. The Austrian forces, led by General Ludwig von Benedek, were a formidable foe with a long history of military prowess and a strong defensive position in the region of Bohemia. However, they were also hampered by outdated tactics and a lack of strategic vision. They were like a mighty fortress, strong but immobile, unable to respond quickly to the changing circumstances of the war. On the other hand, the Prussian army, under the command of King William I and his chief of staff, Helmuth von Moltke, was a well-oiled machine with a strong emphasis on speed, maneuverability, and technological innovation. They were like a swift and deadly sword, cutting through the enemy's defenses with precision and ease. The Prussians had a clear strategic vision, one that emphasized the importance of mobility and surprise. In the spring of 1866, the Prussians launched a series of bold attacks against the Austrian allies in southern Germany, quickly gaining the upper hand. The Austrians, realizing that their position was precarious, began to concentrate their forces in Bohemia, preparing for a decisive battle. As the Prussian army advanced into Bohemia, the lush green landscape unfolded before them like a canvas of endless possibility, punctuated by the occasional village and the winding Beistesees River. The air was heavy with anticipation, the scent of damp earth and gunpowder hanging in the balance. The Prussians, with their superior artillery and well-trained infantry, took up positions on the high ground to the north of the village, their guns deployed in a staggered formation to maximize their firepower. The Austrians, under the command of General Ludwig von Benedek, formed a defensive line along the Beistesees River, their troops arrayed behind a screen of skirmishers and artillery batteries. As dawn broke on July 3rd, the Prussian artillery opened fire on the Austrian positions, unleashing a relentless barrage that would last for hours. The thunderous boom of the Krupp cannons shook the earth, sending shockwaves through the ground as they pounded the Austrian lines with precision-guided shells. The Austrian guns, largely outdated and inferior to the Prussian ordnance, struggled to respond effectively, their shots often falling short or wide of their targets. As the artillery duel raged on, the Prussian infantry began to move forward, advancing in dense columns towards the Austrian lines. Their faces set with determination, they trudged through the muddy terrain, their rifles at the ready. The Austrians, however, were not easily intimidated, and they launched a series of fierce counterattacks against the Prussian positions. One such attack, led by the Austrian Fourth Corps, managed to break through the Prussian lines near the village of Chlum, but it was ultimately repelled by the timely arrival of Prussian reinforcements. The turning point of the battle came when the Prussian First Army, led by General August von Steinmetz, launched a surprise attack on the Austrian right flank, catching them off guard and sending their lines reeling. The Austrians attempted to regroup, but the Prussians were relentless, pressing their advantage with wave after wave of infantry assaults. The sound of gunfire and screams filled the air as the two armies clashed in a maelstrom of steel and blood. As the battle raged on, the Austrian lines began to waver, and by mid-morning they were in full retreat. The Prussians, sensing victory within their grasp, pursued the Austrians with vigor, cutting down anyone who stood in their way. The roads leading from the battlefield became choked with fleeing soldiers, civilians, and wounded men, creating a scene of utter chaos and despair. The cries of the wounded and the dying filled the air, a haunting reminder of the human cost of war. In the midst of this carnage, one notable incident occurred when a group of Austrian hussars attempted to charge a Prussian artillery battery that was deployed near the village of Sveb. The hussars, dashing forward with reckless abandon, were cut down by the Prussian gunners, who unleashed a devastating volley of canister shot that sent the hussars tumbling to the ground. As one Prussian officer later recalled, "The Austrian cavalry was magnificent, but it was also futile. They charged our guns with the same bravery that had characterized their ancestors at Austerlitz, but they were no match for our modern artillery." The Prussians, with their emphasis on technology and discipline, had created a new paradigm for military success, one that would be studied and emulated by armies across Europe. As the Austrian army retreated in disarray, their once proud columns now broken and fragmented, the Prussians continued their relentless pursuit, pushing deep into the heart of Bohemia like a juggernaut. The landscape itself seemed to bear witness to the devastation, as the rolling hills and forests of the countryside were scarred by the passage of armies. The capture of key cities such as Prague and Olomouc marked a significant blow to Austrian morale as the very fabric of their empire began to unravel. The Battle of Sadowa, fought on July 3, 1866, had been a crushing defeat for the Austrians, with estimates suggesting that they suffered over 40,000 casualties, including killed, wounded, and captured soldiers. The sheer scale of the disaster was staggering, as entire regiments were decimated and veteran units shattered. As one Prussian officer observed, "The Austrian army was like a mighty oak tree, its branches broken and splintered by our artillery and infantry." The aftermath of the battle saw a significant shift in the balance of power in Europe, as the Austrian Empire, once a dominant force on the continent, was now weakened and humbled. The Prussian victory paved the way for the unification of Germany under Prussian leadership, with King Wilhelm I being proclaimed German Emperor in 1871. As the German statesman Otto von Bismarck later observed, "The Battle of Sadowa was the birthplace of the German Empire, and it marked the beginning of a new era in European history. The implications were far-reaching, as the old certainties of the concert of Europe gave way to a new order." With Prussia emerging as a major power, in the years that followed, the Battle of Sadowa became a legendary victory for the Prussian military, celebrated in songs, poems, and paintings. As one historian noted, the Battle of Sadowa was a defining moment in German military history, and it continues to be studied by military strategists around the world today. The battle's impact on military thought was profound, as it marked a turning point in the development of modern warfare. With the introduction of new technologies such as the breech-loading rifle and the use of railroads for mobilization. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.